Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this great session on youth-adult partnerships. My name's Amy Muirs, the CEO for the National Youth Leadership Council, and I'd like to invite Ananya to introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Ananya Singh. I was on the YAC for 2 years, and now I'm serving mostly as a YAC mentor for the new YAC. I've worked with NYLC because I'm really passionate about service learning and especially about youth-adult partnerships. So I'm really excited to get this started.
So just a quick, just a reminder about who NYLC is, and that our mission is to create a more just, sustainable, and peaceful world with young people, their schools, and their communities through service learning. And we are over the moon to be working with our Project Ignition teams to address issues of teen driver safety around the country. We have teams from as far away as Hawaii and as close to Minnesota here, where we're located, all the way over to the East Coast. So thank you all for joining us tonight to talk about youth-adult partnerships.
So going back to the idea of service learning, it's an approach to teaching and learning in which students use academic knowledge and skills to address genuine community needs. This is how NYLC defines service learning. And it is a really powerful way to take what you learn in the classroom and make a real impact with it. It can be such an empowering experience for everyone who's involved, for community partners, for the students themselves especially, and for everyone who gets to be a part of the process.
So tonight we're really going to focus in on this great tool that NYLC adapted called Roger Hart's Ladder of Participation. So sociologist Roger Hart published this groundbreaking work in 1997, and it's still being used by leading youth organizations today. And it really encourages both youth and adults to examine why and how young people participate throughout their communities.
And yeah, okay. Was that it?
Yep, go ahead, Ananya.
So it can be really important to consider this ladder and to consider the ways we're working together as youth and adults in a service learning project, because you can take a project to such a deeper level that is more engaging for everyone, it's more meaningful, and it becomes more impactful in the end. As a young person, I've experienced projects where it's been on a really low level, and you can tell that it's obviously a lot easier to just do a project where it's mostly adult-led, and you don't have to do a lot of thinking, a lot of planning about how young people are involved. But when you do put in that effort to think about the ways that youth and adults are working together and what the power balance is like and how you can make it more equitable, the outcome is just more impactful, like overall. Young people feel like they'll have more of a voice, they will be more invested in the project, and they will be more passionate and dedicated about whatever is going on. And adults are able to really see their students take on that leadership and work to support them in a more meaningful way. So it can be super impactful.
So
and it's definitely worth the extra effort.
Thanks, Tanya. So we're going to walk through the different rungs of the ladder and over the next few slides. And towards the end of the presentation, we're going to open it up and ask you all to share places where you've experienced where you have different examples of where you were at on the rung or where you've seen this along the way. So as we're walking through these, kind of jot down or think about where you've experienced or seen these different levels happen throughout your programs, others' programs, etc.
Okay, so diving into the first, starting from the bottom, the first layer of the ladder is manipulation. These are adult-led activities where young people are directed to do something without understanding the purpose of the activity. And young people mostly just participate. They don't understand the purpose. That's really what differentiates this from the other steps. And they're expected to just follow along and learn without really asking questions and without really being consulted about the effectiveness or giving their input.
And really at this level, the adults, they don't engage students at all in the planning. They're really controlling, like Ananya said, they're controlling exactly what's happening throughout the project, throughout the process. And they're not even conceiving of where young people can be contributing throughout the program.
So then moving up a step to decoration, the key thing that differentiates this is that young people do understand the purpose of what they're doing, but they still don't have input in what they're planned. They are still participating without really contributing. They're not really planning or evaluating it, and they're still expected to just follow along, even though they may understand the purpose.
And also at this level, then the adults, they still might not have an awareness about where youth could be contributing. They're still completely in control of the activity and the outcomes. They've explained why or the purpose of the activity, but there's really no direct link between the purpose and the youth themselves. And they're definitely not participating in any of the evaluation activity.
Then we have the third rung, tokenism. So this is an adult-led activity where young people can be consulted, but their feedback is not really taken seriously. And there are obviously going to be some flaws with the way they're being involved in the process. So they're going to understand the process. They're not going to be entirely passive, but even if young people are involved in the decision-making process, they're not going to have much power or influence. And they're also not going to have the opportunity to consult with their peers, to formulate their own opinions and ideas.
And I think where we really see a big difference between this and the previous rung is that youth are given a voice, and a lot of times adults think that they're giving young people a voice, but there's still very little say or choice when it comes to communicating, planning, implementing the project and the activities. So adults are still very much in control of the outcomes.
Mm-hmm. And this is a level that I've seen a lot of projects kind of get stuck at when you're not really thinking through the ladder and when you're not really being actively trying to build up this partnership. I see a lot of tokenism taking place because sometimes we don't think about the ways you could take the partnership even further. So moving forward, it's assigned but informed. So working at this level, young people do understand the purpose. They don't plan the activity on their own, but they are actively participating and they have a more meaningful role, and they will be able to contribute and provide their own opinions and put their own input into the process. But their input is not necessarily going to be used very deeply, and it probably will not be used to inform future activities.
And for adults at this level, they're still deciding the activities for the students. They may take into consideration their interests or learning styles, but they're still not engaging youth in the final decision about what that looks like. They are encouraging youth to be active participants, and they're aware of the activities and the purpose, the young people are, and they may or may not yet engage them in the evaluation and feedback loop.
So for the next rung, youth are consulted and informed. So young people will be able to give advice about the projects. They're going to understand the process, and their opinions will be taken into consideration and treated seriously. And they will probably be asked to provide opinions and included in evaluation process to affect future activities.
And adults are really engaging students in the design of the activities and the projects. You can see them consider the advice from the young people when they're planning. They're still leading the implementation 100%, but they're looking to create that space for evaluation and feedback of the activity so that it can be used to inform the future activities.
And then when we get up to the next rung, rung 6, what shapes this is that there's shared decision making with young people and adults, even though it's still initiated by adults. So young people might determine topics and provide input. They're going to share some of that decision making power. They're going to understand the process of planning and implementing the activity, and they're going to provide input that is actually taken seriously, and they will probably be asked to provide input on evaluation that will be taken seriously.
And adults at this level, they take that youth input into account. They plan, they think about the youth voice, the opinions, interests, and preferences of youth. They create that space for youth input, and they do look for youth to evaluate and give feedback. So you can really see that now we're reaching the higher levels of the youth-adult partnerships.
And then at rung 7, this would be an activity that is entirely youth-initiated and directed. So young people are coming up with the ideas, they're implementing it, they're evaluating it, but the thing that separates this from the highest level is that they're working entirely independent from adults. So it's not really much of a partnership, it's mostly just being led by youth.
And this is where really adults are supporting youth decision. They trust the leadership of young people, but they're not adults aren't being consulted by youth about the planning, implementation, evaluation. So it really is youth initiated indirectly with little input from the adults.
And then when we're at the highest level, rung 8, it would be youth initiated but shared decision making with adults. So young people are able to completely share their power with adults. They're going to be determining the ideas, inviting adults to join them in making decisions. They're going to be implementing the activity and working together with adults to evaluate and make changes for the future. And it's really a partnership at this level because while youth bring things up and they will start off the process, it's going to be entirely shared responsibility, and they'll be able to take input from adults very seriously.
So this is the level that I think we all strive for. And at NYLC, we call it the guide on the side, where we're serving as a resource for youth as they plan an activity. We're consulted by youth to make decisions in partnership. We support youth while they facilitate their activity. We work together to evaluate and make changes for future projects. And we really trust in the leadership of young people, and we build that trust with them. So what we'd love to do is go through each rung, and in your chat box, if you want to share where you've experienced or seen the different rungs happen throughout either your programming you've seen others deliver or experience. Otherwise, we do have examples to share as well, but we would love to get your input as much as we can on a webinar.
And if everyone can see the chat box, it's on the bottom of your screen, right next Yeah, on that bottom section. So. Okay. So does anyone have an example of a project that they've seen that is on manipulation? Okay. So if anyone does have any examples that they come up with at the time, you definitely just drop it in the chat box. But we can move on to our own example of manipulation. So this would be a teacher deciding to hold a food drive in their classroom for a local pantry, and the teacher just sends a letter home with their students asking parents and guardians for donations. As you can see here, they're not having any input from young people whatsoever, and they're just being sent home this letter and expected to contribute.
So our next rung is the decoration. So if you have any examples from this rung, we would love to hear your examples. And maybe just to make it easier, I'll bring up our example, and as Ananya is sharing that, if you have any that you want to add to the chat box, go ahead, because I know there's 8 different rungs and sometimes it's hard to remember what each one was. So this was our example.
So the difference between manipulation and decoration is that young people understand the purpose of what they're doing. So this would be a teacher deciding to hold a food drive, but she's telling her students about what the food drive is and where the food is going to go. So she would send home a letter with each student and ask parents and guardians for donations, but now they understand what they're doing and where it's going to go. Does anyone else have examples of that? Okay. And if not, we can move on to the next level,
which is tokenism, which is where we talked about, Ananya shared that a lot of the programs that she's seen happen, this is kind of where people get stuck. So here's our example for tokenism, and again, feel free to share your own examples as well.
Okay, so what this would be is, so the teacher is still having the food drive and he's telling the students about the food drive, and then he's also going a step further and facilitating a discussion about different food pantries in the area and asking for different suggestions and their input. But he's already chosen one ahead of time, and they're still going to send home that letter. And after the food is collected, he's going to write to the local newspaper, and a reporter will come to take photos of the students and interview a few of the students about their views. But you can see, even though they are giving their input and they're working a little bit deeper of a level, they're not really being considered in the planning of this. He's still ultimately choosing the activity, and he's still implementing all of it.
So then rung number 4 was assigned but informed. And so just as a reminder, here's our example.
So at this level, this is where a teacher is preparing a week-long lesson plan about the issue, food scarcity and poverty, and then students are asked to come up with lists of people they know who could donate. Every student is going to go to the people and explain the project to collect the food. It's not just being sent out to their parents and guardians. And after the project, they're going to be asked to reflect with suggestions for future food drives. So you can already see here, they're working on a deeper level. They're asked to contribute and implement parts of it, as well as take on the reflection part, and their input is going to be considered for evaluation.
And I will share, this is really rung 4 is where I see a lot of service learning light, where students are assigned a project and do the research and some reflection activity of some kind. And this is where people get the service learning, they kind of get stuck, and where the outcomes for the students aren't as deep as if you move higher up the rungs of the ladder. So rung number 5 is consultant and informed.
So what's going to happen at this level is that the teachers are going to be asked to develop their own ideas about how to address these issues after they're diving into that lesson. So the teacher will have her suggestions that they'll donate to the Helping Hands Pantry, and students will agree to that. So there's that consultation piece of it. Students are going to deliver that list again and go to the people, and they're going to have their reflection piece again, but there's also going to be a brief discussion to talk about the food drive and suggestions for next time. So you can already see here, they're actually allowed to have that step where they're deciding and agreeing on the food drive and agreeing on that together.
And then rung 6 again was that adult-initiated shared decisions with youth.
Okay, so at this level, it's different because the teacher would prepare a 2-week unit on community and helping others, and to prepare about the issue, to prepare for the lesson, she's asking the students to write down issues that they see in their own community. And so she sees that students are writing about poverty and food insecurity, and that's when they have the decision to have the food drive. Students are still going to research and choose the pantry. They're going to set up a site visit, and the class will go talk to the food pantry coordinator about types of foods that they need, who they could serve, and then they're going to develop the list of people that know, collect the food from the people on the list, and after the project, teachers will set aside a whole class period to reflect and evaluate the project, and then ask students what worked, what should change, and this feedback will be documented and taken into consideration. So this is like the issue itself is being brought up by the students, and they're really working pretty closely to develop and plan this project together, going to the site visit, researching a pantry, and doing a deeper level of reflection and evaluation.
And it's at this stage where you can really connect the service to the learning outcomes. You can see where the research and the investigation and the project planning, all of that starts to really inform the learning that's happening as the students are doing the project. And then once again, rung 7 was that youth initiated and directed.
So this project in a classroom setting could look like a teacher telling students that they have half an hour each class period for 2 weeks to complete a service project and develop and implement it entirely on their own. So the students will discuss possibilities, they would recognize the issue of poverty and food scarcity, research it in their community, reach out to the food pantries on their own, determine the needs that exist, create the lists of people, and then explain the project and contact them. And then afterwards, the students ask their teacher to help drive their donations to the pantry, and they present to their teacher about their project and why they want to do it again next year. So you can see they're working at a pretty high level. It's completely being driven by the young people, but they're not really consulting with the teacher at all and taking her input into consideration in this scenario.
And a lot of times what I've seen, the youth initiated and directed comes out of clubs at school where, they'll, the youth will decide they want to do a food drive or, something that is central around their community, but really they might have an adult advisor. And so, again, there's different times and spaces for a lot of the different places on the rung, but where we're trying to get to through service learning is the youth initiated with shared decisions with adults.
Okay, so at this level, the scenario would look like, so the teacher would do a unit on poverty, where students would be passionate about helping their community and discover the need for increased donations to the local food pantry. Then they would partner with their teacher, the administrative staff, and the food pantry to host the food drive. After the event, the students, principal, teacher, and food pantry coordinator meet to evaluate and develop a strategy to make this an annual event focused on ensuring necessary items are donated and the food pantry has adequate resources. You can see a lot of the best aspects of the Youth Adult Partnership Ladder are really taking place here. Students are leading it and being able to initiate it, but they are partnering with their students, with their teacher, with the admin, and with the food pantry. So they're not completely on their own.
And this is where the real service learning happens, because there's that partnership with the adults. The students are meeting learning objectives, whether it's in school or out of school time. You're getting to those to that greater goal for the students, as well as building those community partnerships and that passion for giving back.
Mm-hmm. And you can see when you are invested and passionate about this, they're more driven to push for this to continue on again. So they're concerned about the sustainability of the project, and they're taking the passion to heart in this scenario.
And I think just one of the other things I'd love to say about the youth-initiated shared decision with adults and just youth-adult partnerships in general is that building, when you get to rung 8, you're really building trust between the adults and the students, and that trust it grows beyond just that single activity or that single unit to a real relationship that helps move both the young person and the adult forward in directions they didn't know they could go. So getting to this rung, it's more than just a partnership. It's really building that trust with adults and students together. So if there are any questions, feel free to share those in the chat box. If you have examples that you want to share, or just thoughts about the presentation, we would love to hear them.
Yeah, I see we had an example in the chat box of experiencing rung 4, which is that assigned and informed?
Yeah,
I think it's assigned and informed with junior civilian and key club projects like creating blessing bags, toy drives, etc. And that's definitely very true. You can see in projects like that where they are really assigned those projects, even if they do have like input in implementing it.
Were there any questions?
Yeah, and so just something I have to say is that while it may seem that implementing these youth adult partnerships and working your way up to that level does take investment, and it takes extra planning and thoughtfulness and having discussions about it and being honest and open, it does lead to youth gaining a much deeper level of investment, of engagement, and it can be a really empowering experience to feel like your voice and to know that your voice is being really valued by the adults in the project. And I've experienced that a lot, and it's just been a very empowering experience. So it's definitely very worth it in my experience, and it's also pretty difficult to think through like the ways that you're like think about honestly what level you are working at and evaluating where you are on this ladder, because I think something really helpful about this tool is it creates very specific like scenarios where you can really match up what you're doing to what level you're working on, because oftentimes it can feel like you're working at on a good youth adult partnership level, but then you realize how much deeper you could take it, and that's really the opportunity to grow and to build something together.
And so I will share too that we will be posting resources to help you with that evaluation, and also tools that'll help you engage students in discussions around youth adult partnerships on our Project Ignition website under the resources area. So in conjunction with this webinar, we'll have the Hearts Ladder out there for you, along with some of the other tools that we've developed that you can really hopefully take this back and do an evaluation of where you feel where you are on the ladder. So I just want to say thank you to Ananya for joining us on this cold winter night to share her perspectives on Youth Adult Partnership. She is an amazing resource, and our Youth Advisory Council is very lucky to have her as a mentor. And I will thank you all for your time this evening. And as always, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out. And the webinar will be available on the Project Ignition website within the next few days. So thank you all and have a wonderful evening.
Yeah, thank you for being willing to help out and make youth adult partnerships possible.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.